Today, I'm going to tell you a story so morally twisted, it will leave you questioning who the real monsters were in the Old West. Set against wind-scoured canyons, rattling jail bars, and a town choking on its own guilt. This is where justice bent to money and fear. It all began with a refusal, a quiet, dignified no, that spiraled into lies, punishment, and a deal that was never meant to be survived. Before we kick off this adventure, don't forget to hit like on the video and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. The dust in Copper Ridge never truly fell. It lingered in the air like a sentence already passed, settling on buildings, boots, and people alike. The same lifeless brown seeping into the bones of the town. Mara Whitlock had once believed this place might offer a future. She arrived 3 years earlier, with a teaching certificate folded neatly in her trunk and hope stitched tight into her heart, convinced she could bring learning and order to a rough frontier settlement. Now she sat behind iron bars in a narrow jail cell. Her blue dress, once clean and pressed, was torn at the hem and darkened with grime. She watched Sheriff Rourke Bell keep his gaze fixed on the floor as he slid a dented tin plate of beans through the bars. The food was cold, half set, but hunger had been her only steady companion for weeks. "Eat," Bell muttered. His lined face twitched with something close to regret. "The town council's meeting tonight. They'll decide what to do with you." Mara's hand shook as she lifted the spoon. She understood perfectly. Everyone in Copper Ridge did. Everything had begun to rot at the moment Barrett Holloway's son Lyle let his lies loose like sparks in dry grass. At first, it had seemed harmless. Lyle Holloway, barely 18 and swollen with confidence borrowed from his father's wealth, had lingered after lessons, asking questions about books he had no interest in reading. When Mara held firm, when she refused his lingering looks and careless familiarity, admiration turned sour. The accusation came on a Tuesday morning in September. Lyle claimed she had pursued him, casting himself as the wronged innocent in a town where Barrett Holloway owned half the storefronts and held the debts on the rest. His word carried more weight than truth. Within a week, Mara was dismissed from the schoolhouse. 2 weeks later, no one would hire her. Women who once invited her to quilting circles crossed the street to avoid her. Men who once tipped their hats now stared with suspicion and something darker. She overheard Agnes Croft whisper outside the general store, "A woman with all that education, preying on a poor boy. What's this world coming to?" The irony cut deeper than any insult. Mara had given her life to teaching, shaping young minds with patience and care. She had never raised her voice improperly to a student, let alone done what Lyle accused. But truth meant little in a town where money decided virtue. Hunger pushed her where pride would not. 3 days without food, her savings gone. Rent demanded she could not pay. She had seen the warm loaf cooling on Caleb Dorn's windowsill and made a choice that sealed her fate. One loaf, worth a few coins at most, became her final crime. At sentencing, Mayor Edwin Croft declared, "This woman threatens the moral spine of our town." Now, as dusk stretched shadows across her cell, Mara heard voices rising from the town hall next door. She shut her eyes and pictured her father back in Ohio, reading scripture by lamplight. "The Lord works in strange ways, Mara girl," he used to say. "Sometimes an ending is just another door." The voices grew sharper. She caught pieces through the thin walls. Burden, waste, an example must be made. Barrett Holloway's voice thundered over the rest. "Gentlemen, keeping her fed and locked up costs money we don't have. For what? So she can walk free and cause trouble again? Silence followed. "I say we settle two problems at once." Murmurs stirred. Mara pressed closer to the wall, heart pounding. "The Apache raids have bled us dry," Holloway continued. "3 men lost last month alone. That blood hunter of theirs has been especially troublesome. What if we offered a sign of goodwill? 1 woman, for peace?" "You can't mean that," Dr. Warren Blythe said, his voice tight with horror. "That's murder." "Is it?" Holloway shot back. "Or justice? She's brought nothing but trouble. Everyone knows what the Apache do with gifts." Some voices protested, others hesitated. Edwin Croft spoke again. "The blood hunter's been quiet lately. It might work. Buy us time." "You're talking about sacrificing a human being," Blythe insisted. "I'm talking about protecting this town," Holloway snapped. "She's poisoned our children, stolen from honest folk, and shown no remorse. Let her be useful for once." The argument dragged on. Mara sank to her knees as their words crushed down on her. She had heard the stories of the Apache warrior they called the Blood Hunter, a silent figure who struck without warning, who left no witnesses behind. And now, they were going to give her to him. No witnesses ever followed the trails he left behind. Even saying his name aloud could still a saloon full of hardened men. They were going to hand her over, trade her breathing body for a fragile promise of peace. When Sheriff Rourke Bell finally returned with his keys, his face looked washed of all color, pale as moonlit bone. "I'm sorry, Miss Whitlock," he said quietly. "I truly am. But the council's decided. At first light tomorrow, the exchange will happen." "An exchange?" Mara's voice barely carried. "The Apache they call the Blood Hunter," Bell replied. "He's accepted arrangements like this before. At least that's what the council believes." He wouldn't meet her eyes. "They say it's for the greater good." Mara studied him, seeing no malice there, only fear. These were not cruel men, she realized, just frightened ones, clinging to the easier choice instead of the right one. Something shifted inside her. The fear remained, but beneath it, something harder began to take shape. "I understand," she said calmly. "And when does this greater good take place?" "At dawn. He'll meet us at Devil's Canyon." Bell's hands trembled as he locked the cell. "Miss Whitlock, this isn't how I wanted it to end." After he left, Mara sat alone in the dark, listening to Copper Ridge breathe through the night. Dogs barking somewhere beyond the jail. A piano clanging out a broken tune in the saloon. Wind slipping through the warped boards of the cell walls. Tomorrow, she would leave this town forever. Whether she would live to see another sunset remained uncertain. But for the first time since Lyle Holloway had destroyed her life with lies, Mara Whitlock felt something other than despair. She felt anger. And she began to understand that anger might be exactly what she needed to survive what lay ahead. The dust might never settle in Copper Ridge. But tomorrow, she would shake it from her boots for the final time. Dawn arrived both too fast and too slow. Mara spent the night counting her own heartbeats, wondering which one might be her last. When Rourke Bell returned with breakfast, real eggs and bacon, a mercy offered too late, she ate without tasting a thing. "It's time, Miss Whitlock." His voice was flat, the sound of a man carrying out work he despised. Behind him stood Deputy Mason Ives, young and uneasy, his hand resting on his gun belt, more for comfort than command. They led her through the back streets of Copper Ridge, avoiding the main road. But secrecy was impossible in a town this small. Faces appeared in windows. Curtains shifted. Mothers pulled children back from doorways. Agnes Croft stood on her porch, arms folded tight, watching with open satisfaction. "You should have thought of the consequences before your wicked behavior," she called, loud enough for every soul on the street to hear. Mara kept her gaze forward, her chin lifted. If these were her last moments in civilization, she would not give them the pleasure of seeing her bend. The wagon ride to Devil's Canyon took an hour. The wooden seat jolted with every rut in the road. Edwin Croft sat across from her, hands clenched until his knuckles blanched white. Barrett Holloway rode alongside on horseback, his expression carved from grim resolve. "You understand this isn't personal," Croft said suddenly, his voice barely audible over the wheels. "It's practical." Mara looked at him, the man who once praised her devotion to teaching, who had shaken her hand at church gatherings. "Yes," she replied evenly. "Trading human lives often is." Croft flinched and fell silent. Devil's Canyon earned its name honestly. The wind screamed through red stone walls, carrying sounds like distant cries. A fitting place for the justice Copper Ridge had chosen. The narrow pass bore scars of old blood. Apache raids, reckless gunfights, feuds settled with bullets instead of words. They halted where the canyon opened into a wide basin ringed by rust-colored cliffs. Morning light painted everything gold and crimson, beautiful and merciless. A small delegation waited: councilmen, prominent townsfolk, and Rourke Bell's informal posse. All men, Mara noticed. The women of Copper Ridge preferred to whisper from safety rather than witness the cost. "He'll show," Barrett Holloway said, checking his watch. "Always does." They waited in desert silence, broken only by restless horses and low murmurs of men trying to convince themselves they were doing the right thing. Mara sat in the wagon, hands folded, studying their faces. Fear poured off them like heat from a stove. Whatever they believed about the blood hunter, it was enough to make grown men sweat in the cool morning air. The horses sensed it first, ears twitching, hooves shifting, nostrils flaring. Then came the sound of hooves, wrong somehow. Too even, too controlled. A rider emerged at the mouth of the canyon, as if carved from shadow. Tall, mounted on a paint horse that moved like a living extension of its rider, flowing across broken ground that should have slowed any other man. Even from a distance, the horse, Drift, seemed less ridden than guided. Mara understood instantly why men whispered the name Bloodhunter with dread. Kesh sat astride his horse with the natural balance of someone who had never known the ground as home. And there was a stillness to him that felt dangerous, like violence held in check by choice, not weakness. The men of Copper Ridge closed ranks without thinking, hands drifting toward holsters they prayed they would not need. Barrett Holloway stepped forward, assuming the role of spokesman with practiced authority. "You came," he called out, his voice stiff with forced confidence. "Good. We have what we discussed." Kesh guided Drift closer, and Mara saw him clearly for the first time. He was younger than she had imagined, no more than 30, with strong, weathered features and dark hair catching fire in the morning sun. His clothing blended worlds: buckskin leggings, a plain cotton shirt, a gun belt that looked once worn by cavalry. But it was his eyes that held her, dark, alert, calculating everything. They moved across the gathered men like a hunter measuring risk. When his gaze settled on Mara, seated in the wagon like a parcel waiting delivery, something flickered across his face, gone before she could read it. He halted Drift 20 feet away, close enough for words, distant enough for survival. When he spoke, his English was calm and precise, surprising several of the men. "You bring me a woman." It was not a question. Barrett Holloway nodded quickly. "As agreed," he said. "One woman in exchange for considerations. She's been nothing but trouble. Theft, corrupting youth, moral decay." His tone sharpened. "A burden to this town." Kesh's eyes returned to Mara. She met his stare without flinching. If death was waiting, she would not bow to it. "Down," Kesh said quietly. The word carried absolute authority. Barrett gestured urgently, and Deputy Mason Ives stepped forward, hesitation written all over him. "Come on," Ives muttered, eyes fixed anywhere but her face. "Don't make it worse than it already is." Mara climbed from the wagon, legs stiff, boots sinking into the dust of Devil's Canyon. She stood alone among the men who had judged her, facing the one who now held her fate. Kesh dismounted with smooth precision. Up close, he was taller than she'd expected, well over 6 feet. Broad-shouldered, lean, shaped by hardship rather than comfort. He approached slowly, movements controlled, non-threatening. Still, the men tensed like prey watching a wild animal step closer. When he stopped in front of her, she could see the fine beadwork stitched into his clothing. "They told you why you're here," he said. His voice was quieter than she'd imagined. Not kind, but not cruel either. Curious, perhaps. Mara lifted her chin. "They said I was payment for their peace." A trace of something, approval maybe, passed through his eyes. "And you believe that is justice?" "I believe," Mara answered carefully, "that frightened people often choose what feels easiest, not what is right." Kesh studied her in silence. Around them, the air tightened. Barrett Holloway shifted, impatient. "Well," he snapped, "is there an agreement or not?" Kesh turned toward the group. Several men took an unconscious step back. "I take her," he said. Relief washed over Holloway's face. "Excellent. Then our understanding stands." Kesh returned to Drift and reached into his saddlebags. He drew out a length of rope, but instead of binding her, he placed it in Mara's hands. "Hold this." Confused but steady, she obeyed. He mounted, then motioned for her to walk beside him. As they moved toward the canyon's mouth, Edwin Croft called after them, voice thin with guilt. "Miss Whitlock, for what it's worth, I hope you find peace." Mara did not turn back. They walked until Copper Ridge's voices vanished behind stone and wind. Only then did Kesh speak again. "You can let go now." She looked down, realizing she had been gripping the rope as if it were the last thing tying her to life. "I don't understand." "They needed to believe you were taken," he replied. "Now they do." He slowed Drift to match her pace. "What is your name?" "Mara Whitlock." "I am Kesh." The name meant nothing to her, but the way he said it made it feel important. They continued on, Devil's Canyon shrinking behind them as the desert opened wide. Endless, bright, unforgiving. "Where are we going?" she asked at last. Kesh glanced down at her from the saddle. For the first time, she thought she saw the beginning of a smile. "Away from them. And after that? That will be your choice." It was then that Mara Whitlock understood something that would have shocked Copper Ridge to its core. For the first time in months, she felt safe. The Arizona desert stripped everything down to truth. With every step forward, the final threads binding her to Copper Ridge snapped. The dust, the whispers, the weight of other people's judgments falling away as the wilderness closed around her. Kesh rode without speaking for the first hour. Drift moved carefully beneath him, choosing each step across ground that looked hostile to life itself. Red stones speared up from the earth like the bones of something ancient and unforgiving. The sun climbed steadily, promising punishment by noon. Mara's boots, made for school floors and church aisles, had already begun to bite at her heels. "We'll stop soon," Kesh said without turning his head, as though he had sensed it. "How did you know?" she asked. "Your breathing changed," he replied, "and you favor your left foot." She looked up at him, startled. In Copper Ridge, men rarely noticed women unless they wanted something from them. This man noticed everything. They halted beside a cluster of beryl cacti, their thin shade offering little relief from the rising heat. Kesh dismounted and drew a leather water skin from his saddle, passing it to her without ceremony. The water was warm, but clean, tasting only of survival. Mara drank carefully, remembering her father's warnings about desert travelers who died with water still in their packs, too afraid to drink when they should have. "Drink more," Kesh said quietly, watching her. "The desert takes what you try to save." She drank again, longer this time, feeling strength seep back into her limbs. Kesh reclaimed the skin, took a brief sip himself, and secured it to the saddle. "You could have killed me back there," Mara said suddenly. "They expected you to?" Kesh was silent long enough that she thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of something old and buried. "Because I know what it is," he said, "to be handed over by people who were meant to protect you." The tone closed the subject. Instead, she watched him pull dried meat and cornbread from his saddlebags, splitting the food and offering her half without comment. It was plain, but filling, and she realized how close she had been to collapse. "They seem to know you," she said between bites. "The people in town." "Sometimes," Kesh replied. "We have understandings." "What kind?" His dark eyes studied her, measuring, cautious, the look of a man who stayed alive by choosing his words carefully. The stories Copper Ridge told had painted him as a beast, blood-soaked, merciless. Yet the man across from her shared his water, his food, and spoke with calm, educated precision. He had shown her more decency in a single morning than the town ever had. "They call you the Blood Hunter," she said. "Names," he answered simply. "Some are useful." "Is that your real name?" "Kesh is enough." He rose, scanning the horizon with practiced awareness. "We should move. Heat turns deadly before it eases." They pressed on, traveling deeper into land untouched by fences or roads. Saguaro cacti stood like silent guardians against the blue sky, arms lifted as if in endless prayer. Far ahead, mountains shimmered in the heat, purple and distant. "Where are we going?" Mara asked as they picked their way across loose stone. "That depends. On what?" "On what you choose." The question unsettled her. When had anyone last asked her what she wanted? In Copper Ridge, her desires had never mattered. First dismissed as a woman's, then erased as a criminal's. "I don't know," she admitted. "Then we follow the land until you do." By midday, the heat became something alive, pressing down with relentless force. Sweat stung Mara's eyes, her dress clinging to her skin as if trying to steal her breath. She had never known heat like this, an invisible weight draining moisture with every step. Kesh called another halt near a rare spring, little more than water seeping through stone into a shallow pool ringed by grass, an oasis that felt unreal. "Rest," he said, dismounting. The desert kills the stubborn. Mara sank into the shade of a cottonwood, its leaves whispering faintly in the breeze. Kesh tended to drift first, the paint horse drinking deeply, coat shimmering in the broken light. "She's beautiful," Mara said quietly. "Her name is Drift," Kesh replied. "It means she survives." "That fits." "My grandmother named her." A shadow crossed his face. "She said even the hardest ground allows something to endure." They rested through the worst of the day. Mara watched Kesh when she thought he wasn't looking, how he read the land, as if it spoke to him. When a hawk circled overhead, he followed its pattern with interest. When the wind shifted, he lifted his head like a wolf sensing change. "You weren't always here," Mara said at last. "I mean, in the desert." Kesh glanced at her, saying nothing, for now. "What makes you think that?" Kesh asked. "You're English?" Mara replied. "It's too precise, too practiced." He exhaled slowly. The priest believed he could shape me into something else. Did he succeed? That depends on how you define success. His mouth curved into a smile that carried no warmth. "They taught me to read their books, speak their tongue, think the way they think." He paused. "In the end, it made me belong nowhere." Mara heard the truth beneath his words. The loneliness of a man suspended between two worlds. It was a condition she recognized instantly. She had lived it. "The people in Copper Ridge fear you," she said. "Fear is useful," Kesh answered, "but it is never the full truth." He fell quiet, watching Drift graze in the thin patch of grass. After a long moment, he added, "Truth is complicated. Sometimes the legend keeps you alive longer than the man ever could." As the afternoon cooled toward evening, they continued on. The land softened, red stone giving way to rolling ground scattered with mesquite and palo verde. In the distance, mountains rose dark against the horizon, their peaks catching the last light like fire. "How far?" Mara asked, unsure what she was really asking. "That depends on where you decide to go. You keep saying that." "Because it remains true." Drift carefully navigated a steep descent strewn with loose rock. "Most people," Kesh said, "spend their lives walking paths chosen by others. You've been given something rare, a chance to choose your own." The thought both unsettled and thrilled her. In Ohio, her future had been orderly and narrow. School, teaching, perhaps marriage. In Copper Ridge, lies and fear had shattered that path completely. Now, moving beside this quiet warrior through land untouched by fences or rules, she felt as if she stood before an endless horizon of possibility. "What if I choose wrong?" she asked. "Wrong for whom?" The question stayed with her as they made camp that evening beside a dry wash framed by mesquite. Kesh gathered deadwood with practiced ease while Mara tried to help, wrestling branches that caught stubbornly in her skirts. "Here," he said, guiding her hands. "Let the grain decide. Fight it, and it fights back." When he lit the fire, it felt almost miraculous after the day's punishing heat. As night settled in, the desert changed its voice. Silence gave way to sound. Coyotes calling far off, small animals rustling in brush, wind threading softly through branches. "It's beautiful," Mara said, gazing up at a sky crowded with stars, brighter than any she'd known in Ohio or Copper Ridge. "The desert shares its beauty only with those who respect it," Kesh replied. They ate another simple meal. Across the fire, Mara studied him. Flame light carved shadows along his face, revealing strength, restraint, and sharp intelligence in his dark eyes. He bore no resemblance to the monster Copper Ridge had invented. "Why did you help me?" she asked at last. Kesh considered the fire. "Perhaps I didn't help you," he said. "Perhaps you helped me." "How?" "By reminding me that not every gift carries poison." Later, wrapped in the blanket Kesh had given her, Mara lay staring into the vast spill of stars. For the first time in her adult life, she understood something that would have stunned the woman she used to be. She felt free. The desert was harsh and indifferent, but it did not judge. It accepted or rejected by strength and understanding, not by rumor or reputation. Tomorrow would bring new trials and new decisions. But tonight, beneath the wide Arizona sky, she was exactly where she belonged. By the third night, they camped beneath an ancient oak that had somehow survived centuries in this unforgiving land. Its twisted branches stretched wide, shielding them from a wind scented with sage and the promise of distant rain. Mara had begun to adapt to the rhythm of travel. Early starts, midday rests, careful use of food and water. Her hands, once softened by books and chalk, were roughening with use. Her skin had darkened beneath the sun, despite Kesh's efforts to keep them shaded during the worst heat. She was changing, becoming stronger, more grounded than the woman who had left Copper Ridge. "Tell me about the schoolhouse," Kesh said suddenly, as they shared roasted rabbit caught in a snare. The question startled her. He had never asked about her past. She looked across the fire, studying his expression. "What do you want to know?" "What you taught," he said, "and why it mattered." Mara pulled her blanket closer as the night cooled. "Literature mostly, history, arithmetic when needed." She smiled faintly. "The children weren't much interested in poetry, but I taught it anyway." "Poetry?" Kesh repeated, not mocking, but curious. "You disapprove." "I wonder," he said slowly, "why someone would teach children about beauty in a place like Copper Ridge." The question surprised her, because it revealed understanding. "Because they needed to know it existed," Mara replied. "That beauty wasn't reserved for better places or better lives. There was more to the world than dust and disappointment." Mara studied Kesh's face across the fire, watching the flames shape light and shadow along his features. "You understand that, don't you?" she asked. "The need for something beyond just surviving." Kesh stared into the fire for a long moment before answering. The priests at San Xavier spoke of beauty too. They called it God's grace, light shining even in the darkest places. "Did you believe them?" "For a time." His voice carried the weight of memory. "Until I learned their grace came with conditions." Mara felt the heaviness behind those words. "What happened?" Kesh picked up a stick and stirred the fire. Sparks leapt upward, vanishing into the night. "They wanted to save us from being Apache," he said. "Turn us into something better, acceptable." He paused. "They cut our hair, forbade our language, taught us that everything our people believed was wrong." "But you stayed," Mara said. 8 years, he replied. "I learned Latin, studied scripture, even thought about taking vows." He looked at her then, the fire reflected in his dark eyes. "I was very good at becoming what they wanted, until the day they told me I could never go home again." "Why not?" "Because home was a place of savages," Kesh said sharply. "And I was meant to be civilized." The bitterness in his voice cut like broken glass. "They said my people would corrupt the salvation they'd worked so hard to carve into me." Mara felt something tighten in her chest. So, you left. I ran in the middle of the night, he said quietly, like a thief stealing his own life back. He set the stick aside and met her gaze. When I found my people again, I had been gone too long. To the Apache, I smelled of the mission. To the mission, I was Apache. He exhaled slowly. I belonged nowhere. Is that when you became the blood hunter? Names grow from what people need, Kesh replied. The whites needed a monster to wear their fear. My people needed someone who could walk between worlds. He shrugged. So I became what was required. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the desert breathe around them. Mara found herself tracing the similarities between their stories. Two lives bent by other people's expectations, shaped into forms they had never chosen. His name, Kesh said at last. The one who accused you. Mara's fingers tightened around her blanket. She had hoped to avoid this, but something in Kesh's honesty made her feel safe enough to speak. Lyle Holloway, she said. His father owns half of Copper Ridge. Tell me. So she did. At first the words came slowly, then all at once. She told him about Lyle's persistence, his lingering after lessons, his comments that edged past decency under the thinnest excuses, about how she refused him carefully, always polite, always proper, always aware of his father's power. He was 18, she said, staring into the fire. Old enough to know what no meant. Young enough to think the world owed him whatever he wanted. And when you refused him? He decided I would either give in or be ruined. Her voice tightened. He told everyone I had pursued him, that I was a desperate woman who had forgotten her place. Kesh's jaw set. They believed him, Mara continued bitterly. Of course they did. He was Barrett Holloway's son. I was just a teacher from Ohio. No family, no standing, no one to speak for me. She gave a hollow laugh. The same women who praised my devotion to teaching suddenly remembered every opinion I'd voiced too freely. Every time I'd spoken like I mattered. And the bread? Kesh asked quietly. Mara closed her eyes. 3 days without food. My savings gone, no work, a landlord threatening to throw me out. Her voice dropped. I saw a loaf cooling on a windowsill, and I took it. She looked up at him. That loaf condemned me. Not the bread, Kesh said softly. The fear, she realized. Yes. His eyes held hers. They were afraid of what you represented. And what was that? She asked. Independence, Kesh said. Intelligence. The idea that a woman could exist without their permission. The truth struck her hard. For months she had searched for her mistake, wondering what she could have done differently to save her life in Copper Ridge. But he was right. Her crime had never been rejecting Lyle Holloway. It had never been stealing bread. It had been refusing to make herself small enough to be harmless. So they traded me to the monster, Mara said quietly. To the legend, Kesh replied. There's a difference, is there? Kesh rose and moved to check on Drift. Mara noticed the tension in his shoulders before he masked it. When he returned to the fire, his face was carefully unreadable. You want to know if the stories are true? He said. It wasn't a question. She nodded, suddenly unsure she wanted the answer. Some are, Kesh said evenly. War turns men into things they might never have become in gentler times. He met her gaze. I've killed white men, taken their property, burned their buildings. I made them afraid to leave their walls. Mara didn't look away. "But I have never harmed a child," he continued. "Never taken a woman against her will. Never killed a man who wasn't trying to kill me or my people." His eyes held hers. The rest of it. The scalping, the torture, the mindless savagery. That belongs to the legend, not the man. "Why tell me this?" she asked. "Because you deserve to know who you're walking beside." He hesitated, then added, "And because surviving out here means learning to see people as they are, not as stories make them." The fire snapped softly between them. Mara felt the air change. Something settling, deepening. Trust, perhaps, or simply two people recognizing the weight of judgment they both carried. "Teach me," Mara said suddenly. Kesh looked up. "Teach you what?" "How to survive, how to see what you see, read the land the way you do." She leaned forward, surprised by the force in her own voice. "I don't want to be helpless anymore." Kesh studied her for a long moment. "It isn't easy. The desert doesn't forgive mistakes. Neither did Copper Ridge." Something like a smile touched his mouth. "Tomorrow, we start." "With what?" "Water." He gestured toward the darkness beyond the fire. "Finding it, saving it, knowing when you've had too little or too much. Everything else grows from that." As they settled down to sleep, Mara felt an unfamiliar sense of anticipation. For the first time since leaving Ohio, she wasn't running from something. She was moving toward it. The desert was harsh, but it was honest. It would test her, push her, maybe even break her. But it would never lie. "Kesh," she said softly into the dark after the fire had been banked. "Yes." "Thank you for not being the monster they believed you were." His reply came as quietly as the night wind. "Thank you for not becoming the victim they wanted you to be." Beneath the endless spread of stars, Mara Whitlock closed her eyes and dreamed not of what she had lost, but of what still lay ahead. Unknown, unmapped. Finally, her own to choose. The fifth morning dawned clear and cool, carrying the promise of another punishing day. Mara woke to find Kesh already checking his gear, movements precise and deliberate. Over the past days, she had begun to learn his rhythms, the way his eyes swept the horizon at first light, the care he gave drift, the subtle signs he read in wind and sky. "Today we learned tracking," he said, handing her a strip of dried meat and a small measure of water. "The desert teaches by doing, not by talking." She found she appreciated that. After Copper Ridge's polite cruelty wrapped in manners, Kesh's directness felt clean. They had traveled less than an hour when Drift suddenly lifted her head, ears sharply forward. Kesh's hand went to the rifle on his back. His entire body went still. "What is it?" Mara whispered. "Listen." At first there was only the familiar quiet. Wind through brittle grass, the distant cry of a hawk. Then she heard it. A thin, broken sound that chilled her blood. Children crying. "We keep moving," Kesh said, his voice hard, final. But Mara had already seen the dark column of smoke rising against the pale morning sky. Her teacher's instincts, silent for months, surged awake. "There are children out there." "Desert carries sounds that lie," Kesh said. "Not our concern." "They're crying," she insisted. Kesh tightened his grip on the reins, but he did not urge Drift forward. "It could be a trap. It could be raiders," Kesh said quietly. "Could be white men fighting their own war. Either way, it isn't ours." Mara stared at the column of smoke twisting into the sky, her pulse thudding in her ears. She understood his caution. They were two people alone in the hostile country, owing nothing to anyone but themselves. But the sound of crying carried again on the wind. "I'm going to look," she said softly. "No. I'm not asking permission." Kesh turned to face her fully. His dark eyes were sharp with warning. "You don't understand what you're walking into. This isn't a schoolhouse where the worst danger is a scraped knee." "Those children are in trouble," Mara replied steadily. "And if we interfere, so are we." The cries came again. Thinner now, weaker, unmistakably the voices of children. Something tore open in Mara's chest. Months of helplessness surged back, of being acted upon instead of acting, of watching harm unfold without the power to stop it. "I've spent my entire adult life protecting children," she said. "I won't stop now just because it's dangerous. You'll stop because it's suicide. Maybe." Her voice did not shake. "But I'd rather die trying to help them than live knowing I walked away." They stood facing each other across a divide deeper than distance. Kesh had survived by choosing his battles with care, knowing every act of mercy in this land carried a cost. Mara had built her life on the belief that children deserved protection, no matter the price. "This is foolish," Kesh said at last. "Probably. You have no weapon, no training." "I have hands," Mara replied. "I can carry water, bind wounds, comfort the frightened." Kesh studied her in silence. The smoke thickened. The crying faded, growing faint. "If we do this," he said slowly, "we do it my way. You follow my lead, no questions. You do exactly what I say." "You'll help?" "I'll try to keep you alive while you help," he said grimly. "There's a difference." They approached with care. Kesh led them through dry washes and along rock shadows that broke their outline. As they drew closer, the sharp smell of burned wood filled the air, mixed with something worse that turned Mara's stomach. The homestead had been small, a log cabin, a lean-to barn, a kitchen garden now trampled and charred. The main structure still smoldered, its roof half collapsed. Bodies lay scattered in the yard. Mara swallowed hard to keep herself steady. "Raiders," Kesh murmured, reading the ground. "Sloppy ones. But they're gone." "How can you tell?" "The tracks are old. Hoof edges have hardened in the dirt. The fire's been burning for hours." He pointed to scuffed earth. "They took captives, but left fast." The crying rose again, clearer now. Mara pinpointed it instantly. "There," she whispered, nodding toward a root cellar behind the house. Its heavy wooden door hung slightly open. Kesh raised a hand, listening. Then he nodded. 3 children, maybe 4, young. They moved in cautiously. Kesh called out first in Apache, then in English. "We're here to help. Are you hurt?" The crying cut off at once, replaced by terrified silence. "My name is Mara," she said gently, using the calm voice she had once reserved for frightened students. "We won't hurt you. Can you tell me your names?" A small voice answered from the darkness. "I'm Nell. My brother Owen's here. And the baby. Lila." The voice wavered. "Owen got burned. He won't wake up." Mara looked at Kesh. He nodded once, grim. They pulled the cellar door open. 3 children were huddled in the dirt below. Nell looked about 8, her blonde hair tangled, dress torn and blackened with soot. Owen was older, perhaps 10, lying limp against the wall, angry red burns climbing his arms and face. The baby, Lila, Could not have been more than 2 years old. "Where are your parents?" Mara asked softly as she climbed down. "Papa went to fight," Nell sobbed. "Mama made us hide here when the bad men came. She said not to come out, no matter what." Understanding hit Mara like a blow. Their mother had hidden them, then faced the raiders alone, buying her children's lives with her own. "Owen needs help," Mara said urgently to Kesh as he followed her into the cellar. "Those burns are bad." Kesh examined the boy with swift precision, his movements calm, his touch unexpectedly gentle. "Smoke in his lungs too?" he said quietly. "That makes it worse. We need to get him to a fort." Mara replied immediately. "A fort?" He nodded once. "Fort Bowie, maybe 20 miles east. They'll have a doctor." Mara glanced around the cramped cellar, then back at the 3 children. Nell was trying hard not to cry, her face streaked with ash and tears. Baby Lila whimpered softly, confused and hungry. Owen's breathing was shallow, uneven, every rise of his chest a struggle. "We can't carry all of them," Mara said, though she already knew the answer. "We can try," Kesh replied. His mind was already working through the problem. "Drift can carry the boy and the baby. We walk. We take turns carrying the girl when she tires. That's a full day's travel with children. Less if we push." His eyes met hers. "But you're right. It's dangerous." "More dangerous than leaving them here?" He didn't answer right away. "Different dangerous." Kesh climbed out of the cellar and surveyed the burned homestead once more. The raiders might return, or other Apache might pass through, ones who won't understand why I'm doing this. He gestured toward the bodies in the yard. Blood calls for blood right now. Mara felt the weight of what he was risking, not just his safety, but his standing among his own people. "You don't have to do this," she said quietly. "Neither do you." "Yes," she answered firmly. "I do." Something in her voice settled the matter. Kesh gave a single nod and began preparing. He fashioned a crude stretcher for Owen using a blanket and 2 broken fence rails, securing it carefully to Drift's saddle. Baby Lila would ride in front, held steady and safe. "Nell," Mara said gently, kneeling to meet the girl's eyes. "We're going to take you somewhere safe. Can you be very brave for me?" Nell nodded solemnly. "Will Owen be okay?" "We're going to do everything we can." Before they left, Kesh took one last look at the ruins. "This changes things," he said quietly. "How?" "Word will spread. Tensions will rise. When we arrive at Fort Bowie with these children." He shook his head. "Some will see proof that not all Apache are enemies. Others will think it's a trick." "And you?" Mara asked. He lifted Owen onto the stretcher with steady hands. "A choice that can't be taken back." They set out beneath the climbing sun. 2 unlikely guardians leading 3 orphaned children across hostile land toward an uncertain refuge. Behind them, smoke continued to curl into the sky from what had once been a family's home. Ahead lay miles of desert, Apache territory, and the fragile hope of reaching help in time. As they walked, Nell slipped her small hand into Mara's without hesitation. For the first time since leaving Copper Ridge, Mara felt the familiar weight of responsibility, not for her own survival, but for lives far more fragile than her own. "Thank you," she said to Kesh as they crested a rise and Fort Bowie appeared faintly on the horizon, still hours away. "Don't thank me yet," he replied, eyes scanning the land. "We're not there." Still, Mara was grateful. not only for his help, but for the reminder of who she truly was beneath fear and hardship. She was a teacher, a protector of children. No desert could strip that from her. The journey tested them all. Owen's condition worsened as the hours dragged on, his fever rising despite their efforts to cool him. Baby Lila cried in confusion, unsettled by the motion and unfamiliar faces. Nell proved stronger than anyone expected, walking for hours without complaint. When her steps finally faltered, Kesh lifted her onto Drift's back behind the stretcher. "I can walk more," Nell protested weakly. "Save your strength," Mara said gently. "We may need your help with the baby later." The small lie gave Nell purpose. She nodded seriously, accepting her role. As they traveled, Mara watched Kesh with quiet awe. The man branded a merciless killer by rumor moved with infinite care around the children. When Owen stirred in pain, Kesh was there instantly. When Lila fussed, he sang to her in low Apache melodies that soothed her cries. "Where did you learn that?" Mara asked during a brief rest, nodding toward the sleeping baby. "My sister had children," he said simply, "before the soldiers came." The past tense spoke volumes. "What happened to them?" His face closed off, the familiar mask settling into place. "War." Mara didn't press. The pain in his voice told her enough. About the man he'd become, and why saving these white children was reopening wounds that had never truly healed. By midday, the heat turned brutal, pressing down like a living weight. They stopped beneath a thin stand of mesquite, though even the shade offered little mercy. The air rippled with heat. Owen's fever surged, his body jerking in restless delirium. "We have to cool him," Mara said urgently, though she knew how little water they could spare. Without a word, Kesh loosened his bandana, soaked it with precious water, and laid it across the boy's burning forehead. "We'll find more," he said when he saw her protest forming. "Children don't have time to wait." In that moment, Mara understood what he was truly giving up. Not just water, life itself in the desert, but safety, reputation, and identity. Traveling with white children marked him as a traitor to some, a criminal to others. Everything he had built to survive this land was being stripped away, step by step. "Why?" she asked quietly while Nell stacked pebbles nearby and Lila slept fitfully. "Why risk all this for children who aren't yours?" Kesh was silent so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely sound. "Because I couldn't save my sister's children," he said. "Because I stood helpless while soldiers burned our village and took the young ones to schools meant to erase everything Apache from them." He looked down at Owen's flushed face. "I can't undo that. But I can make sure these three don't die alone in the desert." The pain in his words struck her like a blow. Mara didn't speak. She simply reached out and touched his hand, briefly, respectfully. Some losses didn't need words. They pressed on as the afternoon heat eased slightly. Nell rode without complaint now, her small body sagging with exhaustion. Lila cried on and off, her skin irritated by the heat. Owen drifted in and out of consciousness, murmuring nonsense. It was Nell who saw it first. "There," she said, pointing. "Dust." Kesh immediately guided them toward a jagged rock formation. His hand went to his rifle as he studied the distant figures. "Cavalry patrol," he said after a moment. 6 riders. "That's good," Mara said quickly. "They can help us get the children to the fort." "Or they'll shoot first," Kesh replied grimly, "especially when they see me." The truth landed hard. To those soldiers, he would look exactly like the stories, a raider with captives. "Give me your rifle," Mara said suddenly. He turned, startled. "What?" "Give it to me. If I'm holding it, you're not the threat. You don't know how to use it." "I don't need to," she said steadily. "I just need to hold it." She met his gaze without flinching. After a moment, Kesh handed it over. Mara checked the safety and stepped slightly ahead of him as the riders approached. The patrol thundered closer. Dust exploded beneath hooves. Their leader, a graying officer, raised a hand. "Halt!" Mara lifted her chin. "Captain," she called out, voice firm with the authority she'd once used to control a classroom. "These children need medical attention immediately. The boy has severe burns and smoke damage." Captain Ford Kellen took in the scene. A white woman holding a rifle, an Apache standing calmly beside injured children, fear and exhaustion written plainly on their faces. "Ma'am," he said cautiously, "are you being held against your will?" "Absolutely not," Mara replied. "This man rescued these children after a raider attack. We're trying to reach Fort Bowie." One of the younger soldiers rode forward. "Captain, that's the one they call Blood Hunter. I've seen the posters." Tension snapped tight as a wire. Mara felt Kesh shift behind her, ready to run or fight. She stepped forward instead, placing herself unmistakably between him and the soldiers. "Sergeant," she said, fixing the young man with a hard stare. "Do you see blood here? Do you see violence? Or do you see a man who's spent the last 6 hours carrying a burned child through desert heat?" Captain Kellen urged his horse closer, eyes narrowing as he studied Owen's injuries. "Those burns," he said quietly. "They're bad." And for the first time since the patrol appeared, the weight in the air shifted, just enough to allow hope to breathe. "The boy needs a doctor, now," Mara said firmly. "That's why we're asking for help, not suspicion." She straightened, her voice sharpening. "And he has a name. It's Kesh. He's done more for these children today than anyone else standing here." Steel cut through her politeness. "So decide, Captain. Are you going to help us save a child's life, or let him die while you argue politics?" Captain Ford Kellen looked from Owen's burned face to Kesh, then back to Mara. The scene clearly didn't fit any lesson he'd learned. At last, he dismounted. "Jonah Pike, hand over your water," he ordered. "Eli Mercer, rig a proper stretcher." Then his eyes locked on Kesh for the first time. "Can you keep pace on foot?" "Yes." "Then move. That boy's running out of time." The ride to Fort Bowie dissolved into dust and urgency. Spare horses were brought forward. Mara was lifted behind one of the troopers, still gripping Kesh's rifle. Nell rode wide-eyed with another soldier, clinging to the saddle horn. Kesh ran beside them, tireless, his attention never leaving Owen, now secured on a military stretcher. When the fort's walls finally rose from the desert, Mara felt the weight of what they'd done settle in her chest. This moment would ripple outward. Stories would spread about an Apache warrior who saved white children, about a woman who stood between him and cavalry rifles. Some would call it hope. Others would call it betrayal. But watching Kesh check Owen again, his face drawn with real concern for a child he'd met only hours earlier, Mara knew the truth. Whatever followed, they had chosen right. Sometimes, she realized, the most important battles weren't fought with guns or speeches, but with simple acts of decency that refused to recognize the lines hatred drew. Fort Bowie erupted into controlled chaos when they arrived. Dr. Nolan Kerr took one look at Owen and immediately commandeered the infirmary. Soldiers scattered, some to relay news of the raid to Colonel Amos Ridgway, others to stare openly at the unbelievable sight of the infamous blood hunter walking calmly through the post. Mara helped move the children, never letting Kesh out of her sight. She noticed how he always stayed close to exits, body angled for flight if the mood turned. "Ma'am," Captain Ford Kellen said as Dr. Kerr worked on Owen, "the colonel wants to see you and him immediately. The children will be cared for." Mara glanced at Kesh. He gave a small nod. They crossed the parade ground under dozens of staring eyes. Fort Bowie was built to repel Apache attacks. An Apache walking freely through its center was unheard of. Colonel Ridgway's office was sparse, precise. Maps covered the walls, marked with pins and notes. The colonel himself was grizzled, sharp-eyed, measuring them carefully. "Miss Whitlock," he said evenly, "Captain Kellen tells me you've had quite an ordeal." "Yes, sir. Those children needed help." "And you," Ridgway said, turning to Kesh. He deliberately used his name. "Captain Kellen says you aided in rescuing white children from an Apache raid." "Yes." Ridgway leaned back. "That puts me in a difficult position. You're wanted for multiple raids against settlers. And yet," he continued, "here you stand, having saved 3 white children." "I am here," Kesh replied carefully, "because children were dying." "Noble," Ridgway said, "but it doesn't erase your past." Tension filled the room. Mara could see the calculation in the colonel's eyes. One of the most wanted Apache warriors stood inside his fort, by choice. Before she could speak, shouts exploded outside. Hooves thundered, rifle shots cracked. Ridgway moved to the window instantly. "Apache war party," he said grimly. 50, maybe more. Mara followed his gaze. Warriors spread across the hills, war paint visible even at distance. Fort rifles answered. "They're not attacking," Kesh said calmly, studying their formation. "This is a demonstration." "Demonstration of what?" Mara asked. "Strength," Kesh replied. "They know I'm here." Ridgway turned from the window, understanding hardening his face. "They've come for you." Kesh shook his head once. "Not to rescue me." And the truth of that settled heavily over them all. "To kill me," Kesh said evenly. "Helping white children marks me as a traitor." The words struck Mara Whitlock like a blow to the chest. By saving Nell, Owen, and little Lila, Kesh had sealed his own fate among his people. The warriors outside were not here to rescue him. They had come to pass judgment, to execute one of their own for breaking the laws of war and blood. "Sir," Captain Ford Kellen burst into the office, breathless. "The Apache leader is demanding parley. He wants the traitor turned over." "And if we refuse?" Colonel Amos Ridgway asked. "They'll assault the fort. They have the numbers." Ridgway's gaze shifted to Kesh. "Your assessment?" "They mean it," Kesh replied. "And they can do it." He stepped away from the shattered window. "But an attack will cost them many lives. Some of their elders know that." Gunfire cracked again, closer now. Soldiers sprinted to the walls. Orders echoed across the parade ground. In the infirmary, Dr. Nolan Kerr fought to keep Owen alive, while Nell clutched Lila, terrified and alone. "There may be another path," Kesh said quietly. Ridgway turned. "I'm listening. Let me speak to them, not as a prisoner, but as a mediator." Ridgway's eyebrows rose. You'd risk that? Some out there are young and hungry for blood, Kesh said. Others remember when peace still had meaning. He met the colonel's eyes. Maybe I can remind them. And if you fail? Then nothing is lost that wasn't already taken. A rifle shot punched through the doorway behind them. The battle was beginning in earnest now. I'm going with him, Mara said suddenly. Both men turned toward her. Absolutely not, Ridgway snapped. They came because an Apache saved white children, she said steadily. Maybe they need to see that trust can be returned. That's suicide. Maybe, she admitted. But those children are alive because he chose compassion. Now he's risking everything again to save this fort. She faced Kesh. I won't let you face them alone. Mara, this is my choice, he said. And it's mine, she answered. Kesh studied her, the same resolve that had driven her into the desert, into fire and blood. At last, he nodded once. It may save us, he said. Or it may kill us both. Then we face it together. Ridgway dragged a hand through his hair as gunfire intensified outside. This is madness. So is letting good people die because we're too afraid to try, Mara replied. After a long moment, Ridgway exhaled sharply. God help us. The walk to the main gate felt like a march to execution. Soldiers fell silent as they passed, some crossing themselves. Captain Kellen insisted on a white flag, though Mara doubted it would matter. At the gate, Kesh paused. You can still turn back. So can you. I won't. Neither will I. The heavy wooden gates creaked open. Beyond them stood 50 Apache warriors in a broad semicircle, war paint stark beneath the burning sun. Rifles and bows were ready. At their center stood Teon, an elder whose presence carried authority and memory older than war itself. Kesh and Mara stepped forward together, two figures against the vast Arizona plain. Behind them, Fort Bowie held its breath. Ahead, judgment waited. The wind carried sage and gun smoke across the ground. Somewhere inside the fort, Owen fought for his life, while Nell and Lila waited to see what kind of world the adults would choose. As they approached the line of warriors, Mara felt Kesh's hand brush against hers. Not gripping, only acknowledging. Whatever came next, they would face it as they had faced everything since Devil's Canyon. Together. With courage born from the understanding that some choices are greater than survival, and that mercy, once chosen, can never be undone. The fate of people who had placed unexpected faith in one another now rested with warriors forced to choose between the sharp comfort of vengeance and the far heavier burden of mercy. At the center of the half-circle stood Teon. He was older than Mara Whitlock had imagined, his body etched with a history of war, scars lining his arms and chest, his face hardened by decades of loss. His eyes held the quiet authority of a man who had buried too many sons. When he spoke, the desert itself seemed to listen. Kesh of the Chiricahua, Teon said, his voice firm and measured. You stand before us marked by the touch of our enemies. Kesh halted several paces from the warriors, Mara at his side. She could feel the hostility rolling off the younger men, hands clenched tight around rifle stocks, while the elders watched in silence, weighing more than words. I stand before you, Teon, Kesh replied, steady and respectful, as I always have, as one who protects life. You shield the children of those who burn our villages and slaughter our people, Teon answered, anger shaped by years of grief. You have forgotten who you are. I remember exactly who I am, Kesh said, tension visible in his shoulders. I am the son of Ashka, grandson of Nokai. I am Apache, he continued, voice rising, and I am a man who will not let children die when I have the power to stop it. A young warrior surged forward, war paint still fresh. Children of our enemies should have been left for the vultures. Kesh did not flinch. If they were Apache children taken by blue-coat soldiers, he asked calmly, would you say the same? The desert fell silent. Several warriors shifted, memories stirred, sons stolen, daughters lost, names never spoken again. Taeon lifted a hand, commanding quiet. You speak as if Apache children and white children are the same. Taeon said, they are not. These people wage war against us. And so, Kesh answered, stepping forward as rifles tilted toward him, we must become like them. We must kill children to prove our strength. The children I saved were not my enemies, he said firmly. They were innocents, trapped in a war they never chose. Nell, 8 years old, hid in a root cellar while her mother died protecting her. Owen, burned trying to shield his baby sister. Lila, too young to understand why her world became fire. He looked from face to face. Were they my enemies? Mara watched the warriors closely. The younger ones remained hardened, hatred still too raw. But among the elders, doubt flickered. You have lived too long among the whites, someone shouted. I remember every drop of blood on their hands. Kesh replied, pain breaking through his calm. I remember my sister's children taken by soldiers. I remember villages turned to ash. But I also remember what my grandmother taught me. He said quietly, that we are a people of honor, not beasts ruled by revenge. Words do not raise the dead, the young warrior spat. Neither does killing innocents. Taeon raised his hand again, silencing all voices. His gaze shifted to Mara. My white woman, he said slowly, his English deliberate. Why do you stand beside one you should fear? Every eye turned toward her, Apache and soldier alike. From Fort Bowie's walls, rifles remained trained on the gathering. Mara knew her answer could end this in blood or understanding. Because fear and wisdom are not the same, she said carefully. I feared this man when I first met him, because of stories. But stories lie. Actions do not. And what truth have his actions shown you? Taeon asked. That he shares his water with the thirsty, his food with the hungry, that he carries injured children through the desert heat, that he risks his life for those who cannot protect themselves. She met Taeon's gaze without wavering. That he is a man of honor, exactly as he claims. Honor, Taeon murmured, tasting the word. An interesting lesson from a people who break every treaty they sign. I cannot speak for all white people, Mara replied steadily. Just as you cannot speak for all Apache. But I can speak for what I have seen, she continued, her voice gaining strength. I have seen this man choose mercy when vengeance would have been easier. The wind stirred across the plain, carrying sage and smoke as the warriors weighed words heavier than weapons, deciding whether this day would end in judgment or in something far rarer on the frontier. I have seen him gamble everything to save children who meant nothing to him, Mara Whitlock said firmly. If that is not honor, then the word has no meaning at all. Silence answered her. The desert wind slid through dry grass. Somewhere far off, a hawk cried, sharp and lonely. At last, one of the older warriors spoke. I knew Ashka, he said slowly. Kesh's father. He once spared a white trader lost in the desert. That man later helped arrange peace that lasted 2 seasons. The elder looked around the circle. Perhaps the son carries his father's wisdom, or perhaps his father's weakness. A younger warrior scoffed, but Taeon lifted his hand. "Drift," the war chief said quietly. The paint horse stepped forward as if summoned. Taeon studied the mare with recognition. "Your grandmother's horse," he said. "She still lives." Kesh answered softly. "She remembers me." "As I remember her," Taeon replied, "and her stories of balance." He paused, eyes distant. "She taught that too much weight on either side breaks the scales. That children are sacred, no matter the color of their skin." Taeon dismounted and walked forward, his movements calm, unthreatening. When he stood before Kesh, he placed a weathered hand on the younger man's shoulder. "You have chosen a hard road, nephew," he said. "It will earn you enemies among our people, and theirs." "I know," Kesh replied, "but it may be the only road that does not end in endless destruction." Taeon turned to face his warriors. "This man has acted with honor, even if we question his judgment. We will not spill his blood today." A younger warrior surged forward. "And what of our dead? Where is justice?" "Justice is not the same as revenge," Taeon said firmly. "We honor our dead by refusing to become the monsters our enemies believe us to be." Some warriors bristled, but none challenged him. One by one, they withdrew, melting back into the desert as quietly as they had arrived. The danger passed. As the last riders vanished into the heat, Mara and Kesh turned back toward Fort Bowie. The gate stood open, and Colonel Amos Ridgway waited, relief written plainly on his face. "It's finished?" he asked. "For now," Kesh replied, "but nothing will be the same. I cannot return to my people," he added, "and I cannot remain here." "Where will you go?" Ridgway asked. Kesh glanced at Mara. In his dark eyes, she saw the question he could not yet answer. "I don't know." 3 days later, Dr. Nolan Kerr pronounced Owen out of danger. His burns were healing, his breathing steady again. Nell rarely left Mara's side, clinging with the fierce devotion of a child who had survived fire and loss. Little Lila had begun to smile again. "They'll need families," Ridgway said as they watched the children play in the courtyard. "Good people willing to take in orphans." "I know," Mara said quietly. That evening, she found Kesh sitting beyond the fort walls, watching the stars appear one by one. Drift grazed nearby, calm and patient. "I've been thinking about what you said," Mara began, sitting beside him. "About teaching children to see beyond stories. There's a valley north of here, good water, sheltered land. It could support a small settlement." "What kind?" Kesh asked. "A place where Apache children and white children learn together," she said, "where they discover the child beside them is not an enemy." She met his gaze. A place that would need a teacher who understands both worlds, and a protector trusted by neither. Kesh studied the stars for a long time. "It would be dangerous," he said. "Both sides would fear it." "Most worthwhile things are," Mara replied. "We might fail. Or we might succeed." He turned to her. And in the starlight, she saw the man who had given her water when she was dying, food when she was starving, and protection when she had none. "A school," Kesh said thoughtfully, "where children learn the world is larger than fear, where they learn stories can lie, but actions tell the truth. And that courage is not the absence of fear, Mara added softly. But choosing what's right despite it. As if drawn by their voices, Nell emerged from the fort, followed by Owen, walking carefully, and a soldier carrying Lila. The children settled nearby, close enough to feel safe. Under the wide Arizona sky, the future, uncertain, dangerous, and fragile, began to take shape. They gathered around them like a scattered constellation, small bodies drawn close by instinct, trusting the fragile safety these two unlikely guardians had created. "Will you really build a school?" Nell asked, her question simple and fearless in the way only a child's could be. Mara Whitlock glanced at Kesh, finding her own unspoken hope mirrored in his steady gaze. "Yes," she said without hesitation. "We will." Beneath the wide Arizona sky, surrounded by children who had learned, through fire and loss, that adults could still be trusted to protect them, Mara and Kesh began to imagine a future neither could have conceived when they first crossed paths in Devil's Canyon. It would demand labor, sacrifice, and patience. Building something new from the wreckage of old hatred always did, but they had learned that the strongest structures were never raised with wood or stone alone. They began with trust, with courage, and with the stubborn conviction that tomorrow did not have to repeat yesterday. The desert wind carried the faint scent of rain and possibility. And for the first time in either of their lives, the horizon no longer felt like a boundary meant for exile, but a line of promise, waiting to be reached. Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. Your presence means more than you know. If today's story awakens something inside you, don't let the trail end here. There are many more tales of courage, devotion, and faith waiting to be discovered. Subscribe, comment, share, and come back as we continue this unforgettable journey. Thank you, truly. Aviso legal. Disclaimer: all stories are intended solely for entertainment and may include fictionalized scenarios or dramatization derived from historical contexts. While AI assists in production, human creators supervise and adjust every piece to maintain sincerity, credibility, and emotional quality. We adhere entirely to platform regulations regarding AI content, ensuring no deepfakes or misleading portrayals. Licensed materials are used responsibly. Republishing, modifying, or extracting content without authorization is not allowed. We appreciate every viewer who respects originality and creative effort.